Welcome back to Hannity. NBC's Brian Williams was not behind the anchor's desk tonight. In an email to staffers on Saturday, Williams said he was voluntarily pulling himself off anchoring duty for a few days in the wake of his lying scandal. Now, Williams has also canceled his upcoming guest appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman, which ironically is where he once lied about being in a helicopter that was hit by an RPG in Iraq back in 2003. But that's not all. Williams' credibility is being further questioned after he claimed to have seen a dead body floating in the French Quarter during Hurricane Katrina, and he also said he got dysentery by accidentally drinking floodwater in New Orleans. Here to now help set the record straight, the helicopter pilot who transported Brian Williams during his trip in 2003 to Iraq, that's Chief Alan Kelly, and former New Orleans health director who helped treat victims of Katrina. That's Dr. Robson Lutz is with us. Guys, good to see you. Thank you so much for being with us. Chief Kelly, let me start with you. So you were on the helicopter. What's the truth? What happened?
The truth is we took off from Kuwait after hooking up our loads. We were approximately a half hour behind the Big Windy crew, the two aircraft that took off ahead of us with their loads. Ran into some weather problems, which caused some fuel problems in having enough fuel to get back to Kuwait after the mission was accomplished. While we were flying up there, we heard over guard an Apache taking fire, and then shortly after that, the Big Windy bird taking fire.
And other than the sandstorm, which I guess you landed very successfully, you took on no fire whatsoever. And how many minutes behind were you with the chopper that got hit with the RPG?
There's no way to know that for sure, but somewhere around 15 to 30 minutes behind the Big Windy aircraft that got shot down.
All right. Now, you heard what he said on David Letterman. Then he also said this during his broadcast on 1:30:15. Here's what he said.
The story actually started with a terrible moment a dozen years back during the invasion of Iraq, when the helicopter we were traveling in was forced down after being hit by an RPG. Our traveling NBC News team was rescued, surrounded, and kept alive by an armored mechanized platoon from the U.S. Army 3rd Infantry.
So he repeatedly said that it was your helicopter, the helicopter he was in, that got hit by the RPG. That's not true.
No, as far as I know, we didn't take any fire. Nothing was fired at us.
How are people like yourself reacting to the fact that we keep hearing the term stolen valor or honor? How do you feel as a person that was there with him, and then you hear the story evolve into this and being repeated often over the years? What was your reaction?
Well, as I stated on the interview with CNN, I don't make any judgments on Mr. Williams in this regard. His position in the back of the aircraft, I'm not even sure if he was up on headsets, but if he was, he could have heard the calls over guard, thought it was us, or I really don't know. I'm not Mr. Williams, but what I can say is, being on the aircraft, one of 3 pilots that were on that aircraft, we did not take any fire.
You would have known if your airplane was hit, if your chopper was hit with an RPG, though. There would have been no ambiguity, correct?
There are certain indications that make that certain when that happens.
All right, Doctor, let me go to this Katrina story, because there's 2 things he claimed. That in the French Quarter, I think he was staying at the Ritz-Carlton, that he saw a body outside the hotel floating face down. Would that have been possible in that area of the French Quarter?
Well, technically, the Ritz-Carlton isn't even in the French Quarter. It is on the border. It's the block that sometimes is considered part of the French Quarter. But that area of New Orleans, as the French Quarter, got very little in the way of flooding. I understand there may have been some water in the street there at least part of the time. That was one of the little fringe areas where it's a little low. But nobody else down here in New Orleans saw any bodies floating in Canal Street.
In other words, in that location. What about the issue of dysentery? He said he swallowed some of the flood water and got dysentery. I know that you helped treat victims of Hurricane Katrina. You were quoted in one article saying that you didn't run into anybody during the time or a month later that had gastroenteritis, which I guess would have been, your equivalent of saying dysentery, right?
Well, that's right. Dysentery is a very violent form of enteritis, particularly affecting the lower bowels. And the infectious problems we saw after Katrina were, number one, skin and soft tissue infections, primarily from staphylococcal infections, staphylococcal bacteria, and then number two, respiratory tract infections. I can't recall treating a single person for anything even resembling dysentery. Certainly, I don't even remember any gastroenteritis. Now, obviously, with the amount of people that were down here, somebody had to come down with some gastroenteritis. I wouldn't be surprised at all at that. But it was not a problem here. There was a problem with some outbreaks in some of the refugee centers, especially the hospitalized centers with very sick people crowded together. But that was all outside. Yeah. That was all outside of New Orleans. I don't believe that the Lake Pontchartrain waters that came over would have carried the bacteria that would have caused a dysentery, a human dysentery.
All right. I want to thank you, Doctor. And Chief Kelly, thank you for your service to your country. We really appreciate it. Thank you for telling your story tonight. And joining